In this video, I'm going to talk about finding sources outside of the library. So library sources like books and articles are going to form the bulk of the sources that you use for your comparative jurisdictional review. But you really should be considering other sources outside of the library. There are very high quality research reports and other types of documents that exist outside of the library that can really add to your understanding of the topic and the way you frame the policy within Canada and beyond. So the first one I want to talk about are in other disciplines what are called gray literature. So this is a broad term that refers to any sort of document and papers that exist outside of normal scholarly publishing. So, books and articles that go through a regular publishing process. So this gray literature consists of, any sort of, in policy studies, it would include things like research reports, policy briefs, policy papers, committee reports, any sort of document or report that's created in the course of business of a committee or a group in order to investigate a particular topic. And these are very common in policy studies, and you definitely should be taking a look at some of these for your papers. So finding these can be very difficult. One, they're usually not available directly through the library search. So don't go to the library to find these. You're not going to find a lot of them. Two, there isn't really one comprehensive search engine that will provide access to reports like this. One of the key factors is knowing the research institutes or the groups who are likely to produce these types of reports, and then gaining access to those through their website or through another source. So in this video, I'm going to show you a few places where you can look for these and a few ideas that you can use to search for these. It's not going to be comprehensive, and likely the way you're going to find them is by finding reference to them in existing literature like scholarly books and articles. So to start, I'll go to the library homepage and I'm going to go to Guides, Browse All, and I'll scroll down to the Policy Studies Guide. So on this guide, you'll see a tab here for policy and government documents. So we're going to click on that. And this page contains quite a few links to government sources that I'll talk about in another video. But if you scroll down, there's a section for policy analysis. And there are quite a few sources listed here. I'm not going to go through all of them today, but I do want to highlight a few that may be useful to you. So the first is Conference Board of Canada eLibrary. This is a subscription service. You'll often come across Conference Board of Canada reports if you're doing Google searching or finding them elsewhere. Those are extremely expensive, and you won't gain direct access to them through Google or other sources. So come to the library for those reports and go through this database. So when you're searching in this database, use very broad terms. Don't go into a whole lot of detail. So this is sort of the opposite of what I told you about searching in the library. Just search, for example, broadband. And you'll see you get a few reports coming up here. Some of these are a little bit older. Keep in mind that the Conference Board of Canada is largely concerned with economic issues, and so that's going to be the focus of most of their reports. So that's the Conference Board of Canada. You can check that out and explore that a little bit more yourselves. The second one I want to show you are the Library of Parliament research publications. So the Library of Parliament, in part, exists to provide information to members of Parliament about the issues of the day, about numerous issues. And one of the ways they do that is by producing these research publications. So if there's a topic that's coming up that's going to be debated or is in the news, the Library of Parliament may be commissioned by the Parliament of Canada to do a briefing on that particular topic. So they'll do some research and dig up some information about that. So you can get access to those research publications by going to Find a Publication and then doing a search. Same approach as the Conference Board of Canada. Keep it broad. Just search for key terms around your topic. So for example, pharmacare. And you'll see there isn't a whole lot, but there is a background paper here on catastrophic drug coverage in Canada. Very similar if you search for broadband. This is a very strange search. You have to put your search term in and then select find. you'll find a very recent report from a couple of months ago called The State of Broadband Internet in Canada. So there are some very good reports in here. These are just going to give you, again, this is a backgrounder. So they're going to tell you, provide you definitions, some basic statistics, and talk about sort of some of the major policy considerations in that area. So this is a really good source, particularly for this assignment, because it's a good summary snapshot of what's going on with that policy area in Canada. And also, it's geared towards policymakers. So the information is going to be spot on with to what the kind of information that you'll be needing for your papers. One more source I want to show you, and again, as I mentioned, you can explore some of these other links and see if there's information in there for you. I'm going to show you Find Policy. So this is what this is a website that uses a customized Google search to search across multiple research organizations in Canada. So a lot of these are independent, often affiliated with a university, but not necessarily. Research organizations, so often called think tanks in Canada. These reports can be difficult to find because, as I said, there isn't usually a centralized repository of these. They publish them on their websites, they send out press releases, and that's how they get promoted. So this will search across all of the think tanks, the research institutes listed here. So one thing to note when you're using research reports from think tanks and research institutes and policy organizations is that many of them exist in order to put forth particular perspectives on policy. And so there is often some bias inherent in the reports that they put out. And there's bias in all types of sources, right? We all have natural biases. But often these come through a little bit more strongly than you would see with scholarly literature. So if you're using reports from a particular institute or think tank, it's often helpful, if you're not familiar with them, to do a little bit of background research and see what kind of perspectives they're coming at the issue from. It doesn't mean that the research that they're putting out is bad. They're often very good research reports, but they're not necessarily comprehensive. So they may be coming at a topic from a particular perspective and presenting only information or mostly information that supports the perspective that they've come into the issue with. So just keep that in mind when you're using these reports. But again, they are excellent sources of information for understanding the policy issues. So again, similar approach, keep your search very, very broad here. Don't go into a whole lot of detail at this point. If you're getting way too many results, then you can narrow it down. So as I said, this is a customized Google search. So unfortunately, you'll get a few ads at the top. So scroll down a little bit until you get to the actual reports. So what this is searching this is just searching the websites of all of those research organizations that were listed there. So a lot of these will be reports. Some of them will just be more like blog entries on the websites or news entries on the websites of these organizations. So just keep that in mind when you're searching. In this search, I'm getting hits from a number of different organizations that you can see here: Policy Alternatives, Macdonald-Laurier Institute, et cetera, et cetera. I'm getting a lot of results, so I may want to narrow my search down a little bit to particular policy issues that I've already identified are relevant. So those are a few ways to find policy papers and the gray literature that I talked about. Again, go through some of these sources on this page and see if you can find some more. One other method I do want to talk about for finding these results is to do a file type search in Google. So I have an example here. So if you're doing a Google search, you can use this identifier file type and then use :PDF, so file type :PDF, and then put in whatever search terms you'd like. I find it helpful to put in broadly what my policy area is about. Put in the word policy because that often narrows it down quite a bit, and then a geographical area. And I find that's a fairly effective search. So this is going to return only PDF documents. So you'll see all my results are PDFs. So I think it's fairly evident, but just in case, the benefit of that is that most of these research reports and great literature and other things come in a PDF format. They're reports. They're usually a little bit longer. So this is a really good way of narrowing down some of those other pieces of information that you might get from Google that aren't as helpful. These will be far more in depth. Of course, always paying attention to your source, and you'll see a lot of these are coming from government sources, as well as policy affiliated organizations and committees and things like that. So it's a really good way of narrowing down your search to get at those research reports. So I'm going to go back to the library homepage. The second type of source I want to talk very briefly about are statistics. Like all other sources, use caution when you're using statistics. In some ways, you need to use even more caution than you would for other types of information, just because statistics and data are often treated as objective fact when they are anything but. They are statistics and data are formed from the specific questions that are asked, and it really depends on how they're asked, who's asking them, and how they're collecting them and presenting them. So they're not necessarily objective fact. They're products of how they're collected. So we do have a guide for data and statistics that I'll show you. When you're looking at, so it's under statistics and data. When you're looking at Canada, for the most part, your first stop is going to be Statistics Canada. They collect stats on demographics, business, health, social issues, a very wide range of topics. So they're a really good place to start when looking for for data on your particular topic. And if you don't already have a data set in mind, StatsCan is a good place just to go and search. With other collections of data or finding statistics, it can be difficult unless you know who's actually already collecting the data about your topic. So go to Statistics Canada. You can do a search. You know what? I'll just go to the page and show you very quickly. You can do a search here. When you're searching the website here, it's going to pull up data tables, reports, news items, and all sorts of stuff that's on their website. So it's quite broad. The trick with searching for StatsCan is knowing which terminology they use to describe the topic, which may not be the same terminology that you're familiar with. So for example, if you're looking at pharmacare, it's unlikely that StatsCan is going to have a lot of data that's labeled pharmacare, although they may have a report or two on the topic. What's most likely is that it's going to be labeled as things like, medication, drugs, pharmaceuticals, or something under pharmacy. There are a wide range of possible categories that could be in. I find it very helpful to browse by subject if you don't already know the terminology that StatsCan uses to define that. And then, for example, you might go to health and narrow it down from there. And then there are a few other ways of narrowing it down over here. So, try out your search, but also consider browsing if you're looking for specific data. Before I might move on to other sources, I do want to talk about one other database we have in the library. So I'll go back to the library homepage. I'm going to go to databases, and we have a database called Statista. You have likely seen this database if you've done any searching on Google for statistics or data. So often if you search Google for statistics, the word statistics plus a topic, some of the first results are going to be from this company called Statista. They've become huge in recent years. However, if you go in through Google, similar to Conference Board of Canada, you're going to have limited access. They'll show you a table with some basic information on it, but you can't look at the source of that data or dig into it at all. If you go in through the library database, we have a subscription, and that provides us with additional information about different topics. So for example, I'll just search for broadband. And if I look at a statistical source, so here we go, wireline broadband technology availability in Canada, it'll give me a brief table, and I can download that in a number of different formats. But what I really love about this is that it provides the source information. Again, you won't get this if you go in through Google. So this is telling me that this data comes from the CRTC, and they even give you a link to the specific report that it came from. So you can use that to identify the full report where you're likely to get additional information on the topic. So check out Statista. As I mentioned, you can start with StatsCan. You can go to Statista, but it's often helpful to know which specific organizations might collect data about your topic. So for example, if you're looking at pharmacare, I would probably check out the Canadian Institutes for Health Information. They have a lot of data on the topic. If you're looking for information about broadband, I would probably check out CIRA, the Canadian Internet Registry Authority, because I just happen to know that they collect data on the topic. But you don't know what you don't know. How do you know that? So one of the techniques that I often use to identify statistical sources is to look for reference to data sets or to statistics in other sources of information. So that can be in research reports, but I'll often just go to news articles and see within that news article if there's a reference to a body of statistical information. So just to show you a couple of quick examples, I went to the Calgary Economic Development website because I was interested in video game industry in Calgary. And I was reading through this little news item that they have here. And so I looked at the full report that they have on that. And you can see here what I'm looking for, what I'm scanning for in this report, even though it's not in a whole lot of depth. They've provided some statistics here about the video game industry, and importantly, they've provided a link or at least a reference to the source of those statistics. So I can now look at that report or try to seek that report to find more statistics. And down here, very similarly, they have a different source of information about the video game industry in Calgary. So those are the kinds of clues I'm looking for. But also, as I said, it's not just in research reports and PDFs. You can also find them in news items. So this is just an article about the digital divide and COVID-19. And so, even though this is not really on my topic, I opened the article because I have a suspicion that there might be some data or statistics available within this news article. And you can see here, there is some information about internet speeds that might be helpful to me, and it tells me again this is coming from CIRA. Also, there are some links to information from the CRTC that I can then use that contain some data. So that's how I most often will identify sources of statistical information. It's not by just Google searching them. It's actually by looking for references to those in news articles, reports, and other sources of information.